رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فوضوا أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير. والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. من شر الوسواس الخناس. صدق الله العلي العظيم. زينوا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. For the love of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And for the hastening of the reappearance of Imam Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: why is there evil in the world? Keep that in the back of your mind, inshallah. We'll return to it. I want to begin with a scenario. Imagine for a moment in time, at the same point in time, two groups, two entities are entering into their house of worship. On one side, you have a Christian man who is entering into his church. And at the same time, there is a Jewish man and a Muslim man entering into their houses of worship, into a synagogue, into a mosque. They both have something, all the parties have something on their head. Let's say the church-going individual, the Christian man has a cap on his head, the Jewish man has a yarmulke on his head, and the Muslim man has a kufi cap, a cap on his head. When the Christian man enters into the church, he instantaneously removes his cap. At the same time, when that person who's a Jew or a Muslim, when they go toward their house of worship, they actually put on their cap. What is the motive behind this? And how is it possible that two entities, two parties, which have a similar goal, have very different ways about going about that goal? You ask the Christian man, why did he do that? You ask the Muslim individual, the Jewish person, why did they do that? And the answer that you will get more often than not is that the Christian man said that I did this out of respect. Out of respect for this house of worship. This is a house of God. And if you ask the Jewish man or the Muslim man, they will tell you the exact same thing. I did this out of respect of my Lord. I did this out of, the Jewish man will say, I did this out of respect of Yahweh, his God. The Muslim will say, I did this out of respect of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The idea being that in order to achieve the same goal, we find that one thing, one entity, respecting an entity, can take one individual to take one action and another individual to take another. Keep this in the back of your mind. When we come to discuss the question of evil in our modern society, in particular in the West, this is something that has been the cause of many people in the West leaving religion. The reconciliation, people cannot reconcile that how does evil exist in the world? And because evil exists in the world, therefore I will not believe. This is something that exists in Western Europe, this is existing in the United States, this exists in Canada, and this exists throughout the developed world. So therefore, I want to look at this issue, and I want to look at what is the problem first of all. What is the problem of evil? What is the idea of theodicy, that is the solution or reconciliation of this problem? What is the view of other faiths and other religions on this issue of evil and why it exists? What do Judaism and Christianity say about this issue? What does Islam say about this matter? What is the view of Islam on the issue of evil? Is there a contradiction or is there not? Is there a difference in Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy on this issue or not? And how does this issue of evil relate very closely to the mission of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and in particular the Imam of our time, Imam Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman, sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. These are the points that I hope to cover in the next brief moments that we have together, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. As I alluded to last night, I wanted to give data. I usually use this because our next generation and our generation, we are trained in a particular way. We are trained in a data-centric way. We are, every individual who goes to high school, who goes to college, a mandatory class of the curriculum is statistics. The idea being that our modern world is an evidential world, an empirical world, where I look and I assess on what is reality based on what the evidence concludes. Therefore, when the modern mind of a young Muslim living in the West in particular, or not even the West anymore because the world has become a global village and ideas have spread throughout the world, the modern mind is saying that, well, with respect to religion, I want the same sort of evidence. And I want to be motivated and understand that the issues and challenges that I face must be proved empirically, and also the answer should be logical so that I can accept it. No longer can I accept, for example, what's the proof of the existence of God? That somebody would come forward and say the proof in existence of God is this old lady who said that there is a chakki, that she is grounding mill flour, and as long as that she is grounding it, it's working, and as soon as she stops, it doesn't work. The same way there must be someone who's running the system. That is something, that is one type of dalil that may work for some. But other people may come forward and say that's a little bit too simplistic, overly simplistic. I need some more evidence. I need some more proof. Therefore, in our modern world, I said the night before, and I've said before as well, that the idea of the West, there is a drift, there is a current, there is a tide, and it takes you in a particular direction, whether you are aware of it or not. By the way, there are beautiful aspects of society here. There's no denying that. We have freedoms that other people can only dream of. We have the ability to have a majlis of Imam al-Hussein. Ask those people who have fear and trepidation at every moment in a majlis. There could be a bomb blast, there could be a shooting, anything of this nature. In Muslim countries, ask those people who lived in some of the Gulf nations how they did majalis. We have these beautiful freedoms. But the point that I'm alluding to is that there are some types of trade-offs. There are some types of consequences. There are some types of side effects. Therefore, to motivate this discussion, at the University of Notre Dame University, a very renowned institution in the United States, they conducted a study on youth and religion. It was the largest study conducted on young people and religion ever done in America. Roughly 2,000 plus individuals who took part in this study. You know, in academia, if you get 30 people, that's a sample size, that should be enough. But 2,000 is sizable. When we look at that data, what did this data show? The data showed three very interesting results. It found that young Americans living in the United States, with respect to their relationship to religion, number one, they were not able to articulately speak about their faith. Think about this for a moment and see if this has any impact on our communities as well. Because we live in the same ocean, we live in the same sea. To think that we are immune would be perhaps naive. We live in the same society. Number one, they said that young people in America are not able to articulately speak about their faith. Meaning what? That if you ask them, do you believe in God? They'll say, yeah, I believe in God. But what other things do you believe? What aspects of God? What kind of God do you believe in? Well, what does your tenets of Christianity or Judaism or Islam, what do they tell you to believe in? Can you speak articulately about the depth of what your faith says? The research showed that they could not articulately speak about what they actually believed. They said, we know that there's a God, we believe in God, we go to church, but we don't really know the depth of what we actually believe. In our faith, that would be like someone saying, I've heard of the term Usul ad-Din, but I don't know that what the intricacies of Tawheed, Adala, Nubuwa, Imama, Qiyamah are actually there. Or someone says Furu'id Deen, I know that there's namaz, roza, hajj, zakat, khums, amr bil ma'roof, nahi anil munkar, tawalla, tabara. I know them by name. I studied them a long time ago, but I don't know what they actually, for me in a day-to-day life, how they apply to me and what's the intricacies of it. That was the first finding of the study, that young people in America are not able to articulately speak about their faith. Number one. Number two, the research found that religion for young people in America is just not that important. It's not on the priority list. It's just there. It's not number one on the list, it's not two, it's not three, it's way down the list if it's on the list. It's not a priority. Remember, if you recall, from the perspective of sociology, America is a very interesting dynamic. Western Europe is much more atheistic, much more agnostic. Therefore, if America is going through this tide, you can imagine it's much worse in other places. And America is on the trajectory of losing faith on a number of levels. And I shared data with you on that yesterday. Number one was that point with respect to youth cannot speak articulately about their faith. Number two, religion's just not that important. Number three, the researchers found that the God that young people in America believe in, Notre Dame researchers, top tier institution, they said that the God that people who are young in America follow is not the God of Christianity or Judaism or Islam. They follow a form of faith called moralistic therapeutic deism. Moralistic therapeutic deism. What does it mean? The idea is that they believe deism meaning believing in a God. They believe in some entity that is there. But with respect to this entity, they say that it's moralistic. I believe in a God that says do good and don't do bad to people. That's about it. And the other aspect was therapeutic. The researcher said that this is a sort of a therapeutic God, meaning it's a God that's available on demand when I need God. So when I'm going through a rough time, I'm not getting the grades I want, work is tough, life is tough, I turn to God in need. And I say, God, help me out here. But when it's the issue of life is going good, God is on the periphery. God is on the sides. God's not part of my life. Moralistic, therapeutic deism. The idea is that religion in modern societies is getting diluted. This is what all the data is suggesting. For you and I as followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, we need to make sure that we are not part of this current where our faith is getting diluted. We must understand that religion and faith must be a priority for us in our day-to-day lives. Part and parcel of that is attending regularly. Make time. Priority, those things that are priority in time, we make time for. Whether that's coming here, that would be wonderful. If not, at least take some time to read some Quran on a day-to-day basis. Some Nahjul Balagha on a day-to-day basis. Some traditions of the Ahlul Bayt on a day-to-day basis. You know, if you want a healthy body, you have to take time to eat well, to eat healthy, to exercise. Analogously, to have a healthy mind, you must do the same. We must take out this time. I mentioned to you the night before that our world, the drift of our world is taking us towards higher levels of anxiety and depression and many other mental illnesses. Why is that? Much of that is because we are comparing ourselves. We live in a relativistic world where I'm constantly seeing what others have, and what I should be getting in my mind. And when we live in this world, you don't get to what society aspires and society tells you you should be aspiring to. If you feel that you haven't gotten there, you start getting depressed. What we must tell our next generation and our current generation is to achieve, to go after, as the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam said, to go after excellence. To be the best that you can be in life, not because of some worldly gains, not because somebody is going to praise you, not because society is going to say you're amazing, but because it's the right thing to do. That's the principle that we as followers, we have a tradition from our 8th Imam, allow me to share. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The Imam alayhimus salam gives us an amazing tradition where he says that if you go to a new town, you go to a town that you've never been to before, and you ask the people in that town, who is the best person in this town? And when they come back to you and they tell you who's the best person in that town, and the answer comes back that it's not someone who's a follower of the Ahlul Bayt, the person comes back and says, it's so-and-so person. and you, by the name of that person, by whatever traits, understand that that person is not a follower of the Ahlul Bayt. The Imam says, it's safe to assume there is no Shia in that town. The idea being that us as followers of the Ahlul Bayt must be the best in society. The idea in terms of our akhlaq, in terms of our merits, in terms of our ethics, in terms of our knowledge. When someone sees us, I remember I was in London just recently, and I was having a conversation with some of the brothers. There was a brother from our community. There's sometimes contentions, many of you who have dealt with Ahlul Bayt societies or Muslim student associations at the university level, sometimes there's always ups and downs through the Shia and Sunni community. Alhamdulillah, generally it's good, but sometimes there's waves. So there was one group that was a bit Salafi, almost Wahhabi, that had some animosity towards some followers of the Ahlul Bayt. And they began to say that we would not speak out to you because of one person who is in your party, in your camp, who is a follower of the Ahlul Bayt, who his akhlaq is perfect. Because of his akhlaq, we cannot say anything against you. That the embodiment of the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, the person who is opposing the Ahlul Bayt is saying that he embodies the right characteristics. Kunu zina lana, the Ahlul Bayt says, the Imam Askari says, be an ornament for us. That when people see you, they say that, how great is this person? If this person is so great, how great must his Imam be? How great must Ali ibn Abi Talib be? How great was Hassan al-Mujtaba be? How great must the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam be if their followers are this great? I remember some of my brothers, maybe years, we were sitting in the midst of Sayyid Sa'id al-Hakim, may Allah prolong his life, one of the great maraji of the Hawza al-Ilmiya in Najaf. And he was telling us about the mu'mineen of Qatif. Qatif, as you know, is the eastern bank of Saudi Arabia. Many of the people who inhabit this area of Saudi Arabia are Shia, followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. This is also where much of the oil is. And when this issue of Aramco was going on, this matter, they had made a policy, many people had said, that those followers of the Ahlul Bayt, they could not get up above, there was a sort of a glass wall, if you will, a glass ceiling. They couldn't get at a higher level because they would be blocked off. The policies, they had systematic discrimination against them. The system was against them, that they were told by policy that they cannot become managers, directors, vice presidents, presidents of this company. It's not possible. As time progressed, eventually the followers of the Ahlul Bayt began to become directors and vice presidents and get in the upper echelons of the company. When the person who was responsible to look at this, when he reported these are the people in position, his superior, who was part of the party that was ruling, began to say, why am I seeing names like Ali and Hassan and Hussein and all these names at the top of the list? Why? I told you they shouldn't be there. They said, we don't have any solution. We can't do anything. These are the hardest workers. These are the smartest workers. These are the most diligent workers. These are the best workers. We have no choice. This is how you and I should operate in the modern world. As followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, where no matter what, people cannot deny. Therefore, I'm coming to my main point of discussion for tonight, which is some of the big philosophical questions that are facing our generation are not questions that can be answered in just a soundbite, for example. They require time, they require effort, they require analysis. And one of those questions is this question of, why does evil exist? The question, allow me to explain. The question in Western philosophy goes as following. There is a God. This God is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent. Omni meaning all. Potent meaning strong. Omnipotent, all strong. Omniscient, all knowing. Omnibenevolent, all good. This God has all three of these attributes. He has all power, all knowledge, and He is all good. Yet I see suffering in my world. Yet I see that 5-year-old child dying of cancer. Yet I see millions of people dying of starvation and hunger. Yet I see people killing each other left, right, and center. Despite all of these things, how can you believe in a God who is good, all-knowing, all-powerful? Surely, this is the argument. The argument is surely a God who has all knowledge. Let's take the example of the child who's suffering from cancer. That child, a 5-year-old, 6-year-old child who's suffering from cancer is suffering. God has the power to, He knows what's going to happen. He knows the child's going to get cancer. He knows the child may die from cancer. He has knowledge of what has happened, what will happen, and what's going to happen, what's happening. He also has the power to stop it. He has the qudrat to stop it. And He's all good at the same time. Number three, how can you reconcile these things? The likes of people, for example, such as Einstein, had a very difficult problem with this. But it seems perhaps Einstein solved the problem himself. Einstein says that the world is a very dangerous place. Not because of evil people, because of those who see evil and do nothing. The idea being that you and I don't live in a vacuum. We live in a society where we have responsibilities. This problem that emerges in Western philosophy, that how can a God that has these three attributes, all knowledge, all power, and all good, still allow suffering to happen in society? And the analogy comes forth in the modern spectrum, in the modern philosophy, of this idea that there's a God who's there who has these traits. How do you and I reconcile this? Is this something that a problem that we face? Because I tell you, this relates directly to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Because a young person who's living in our world, in our society, will say, well, why did the Imam have to go through this? Why did his kids have to suffer from thirst and hunger? Why must 18 of his family members be slaughtered in this way? Why must 72 of his companions be slaughtered in this way? God knew it was going to happen. God had the power to change it. God's all good. How do you reconcile this? This is a question that people are asking. And we need to give solid answers to this so people understand what is our position on this matter. The idea is, in Western philosophy, about the issue and the matter with respect to God having these traits and evil existing, is that God created the world. This creation of God, if He created it, He had the ability to change it. And if He has the ability to change it, why isn't He changing it? Why does the Holocaust happen? Why do these things happen? Why did Karbala happen? Do you know what's interesting about this phenomenon? This is a purely Western philosophical question. This question doesn't exist in the East. When I say Western philosophical, I'm being very careful with my words here. Western philosophical doesn't mean necessarily geographically. There are countries that are Eastern geographically, but they still govern Western philosophy. South Korea, for example. Somebody may say, for example, Australia, New Zealand, the likes. Geographically, they're in the East, but in terms of philosophy, they have Western philosophy. This question exists in Western philosophy. It doesn't exist in Eastern philosophy. Why? It doesn't exist in Buddhism. It doesn't exist in Shintoism. It doesn't exist in Hinduism. And it definitely doesn't exist in Islam. Why? When you look at this question, philosophers in the East, they say with respect to this issue of evil, it's a false dilemma. The question itself is wrong. Why? Because in Eastern philosophy, it's understood that God created the universe. God is all good, God is all powerful, God is all knowing. All of these traits apply. God, who is all good, all knowledgeable, all powerful, created our universe, created the world. This is where it gets interesting. Please bear with me. God created the universe. Creation implies separation. Creation implies separation. Meaning what? I made this mimbar. Let's assume, for example, I create this mimbar. When I create this mimbar has certain traits and certain properties. It has a certain length, a certain width, it has certain dimensions. And it also has a certain hardness, it has a certain softness, it has certain properties. This mimbar is not me. It's a creation of mine. In Western philosophy, creator and creation get conflated. The issue gets collapsed on one another. Therefore they say this world, evil exists, therefore God must be evil. Whereas in Islam, in Buddhism, life is said to be suffering. In Buddhism it's very clear, life will be suffering. Because what ends up happening is, depending on the way I look at the world, I see a different world. If I put on rose-colored glasses, I see a rose-colored world. If I put on green-colored glasses, I see a green world. This is why I gave the example at the beginning with respect to how it is that one group, the Christian, when he enters into the church, he removes his hat. When the Jew and the Muslim enter the mosque and the synagogue, they wear a cap. Both are trying to show respect, but the means by which they look at the situation is different. With respect to Eastern philosophy, in Hinduism, Muslim, Islam, the idea is creation implies separation. Therefore, this world, because God is all good, and this world is separated from God, it's a creation of God, like the chair or like the light bulb, it's a creation, it's not God. Therefore, this world will not be perfect. This world will have evil. This world will have suffering. That person, in Western philosophy, we're told to wear rose-colored glasses, and life is supposed to be beautiful. But then when you trip and fall and life gets difficult, you're not able to reconcile. But in Eastern philosophy, they say, no, you will be tested, there will be challenges. And then when beautiful things happen in life, you say, wow, how beautiful is that? It's a different way of seeing the world. This is exactly what happens with respect to this idea. When we see evil in the world, what is our relationship with it, and what is the relationship of other faiths? I want to look at what the Judeo-Christian narrative is. When you go to the Torah, when you go to the Old Testament of the Bible, you will find within it the story or the book of Job. J-O-B, Job, who we will call Nabi Ayyub alayhi salam. Ayyub alayhi salam, his story is in the Old Testament in the Bible. The idea comes forward within the Old Testament that God has given Job all of these gifts. God has given Job a beautiful family. God has given him farm and land. God has given him wealth. God has given him children. God has given everything a man could want. And then Shaitan comes to the Lord, the Creator, and says that this creation of yours, this prophet of yours, Job, he has everything in life. Life's good. He has everything anyone could want. If you remove these things, if you take away his health, if you take away his wealth, if you take away everything, he won't believe anymore. Therefore, God tested him. God said, very well, remove one by one each thing. Remove his wealth, his crops were destroyed. Remove his children were taken from the earth. One by one, and at a moment in time, his health began to deteriorate. You know, this still happens. Job, we're told that at this point in time, he dealt with everything. But even in the Islamic narrative, the next books, the first 2 to 3 books with respect to the issue of the book of Job, they deal with the issue looking at what happened to him. Do you know what the next roughly 30 books deal with? They deal with what the people said about Job. They said that he's suffering because he must have done something wrong. Therefore, God is punishing him. Doesn't this happen in our societies? People come forward and say, oh, that person's blind, that person's handicapped, that person has a disability. They must have done something wrong. Maybe their parents did something wrong. This is an adab on them. Islam does not agree with this notion, by the way. We don't have this notion that someone suffering from a disability, they definitely did something wrong. No. Islam has a much more sophisticated way of looking at this, which we'll get to in a moment. This idea of Job, one after the other, he lost everything, yet at every moment he is thanking his Lord, his Creator. He's saying, Alhamdulillah. We come to the Islamic narrative on this issue. He loses his wife, he loses his property, he loses his family. His wife was with him throughout. To the point that he even became afflicted with leprosy, they say, the skin disease. And he was isolated from society. He never complained to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except saying one word, that Allah, I have been afflicted. And Allah delivered his help and hope at that time right away. There's a very interesting narrative here with respect to evil that the Old Testament talks about, by the way. That God then shows to him that when we were putting you through this, when you had everything and when you lost everything, that was not bad. And God shows, through the Old Testament, God shows Job these 2 creations of his, 2 animals that are fighting. Imagine for a moment that you go to the savannah, you go to Africa, you go to India, and you see a safari. When you go on this safari, you see a tiger or you see a lion attack, for example, a buffalo or a wildebeest or some other animal or a deer. When that animal, who's the cheetah or the lion or the stronger animal, attacks, what do you say at that moment? Do you say this is evil? Many times people say this is magnificent. This is amazing. It's nature, the natural wonder. The idea being that this is what they know, this is what exists. You and I may not understand the intricacies of God's plan. And we need to be mindful of that. Therefore, listen to the very next line that I'm about to say, because I'm about to explain it, it's very critical. The separation from heaven, from God, that we have, the separation, the creation of our universe, that separation manifests itself on the human plane as evil. This idea that what we see as the separation between heaven and us, that manifests itself in the form of evil in our minds. Allow me to explain. Islamic architecture is a beautiful thing. I don't know if you've ever studied it. When you study Islamic architecture, many times you will see a dome within mosques. Do you know what that's symbolic of? That dome is symbolic of the meeting point between heaven and earth. That where that dome begins is actually the starting point of heaven. You know, mosques are designed throughout the world in order to remind you and I of the presence of God. If you go out throughout the world and look at the different types of mosques, for example, during the Mughal era, the Badshahi mosques, or the Ottoman era, you look at Hagia Sophia, or you look at all these other great mosques that are there, the Blue Mosque, they have these very open courtyards. And they have these very open spaces. The idea was when you enter the mosque, you are supposed to be reminded of the grandeur and the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That when you enter into that courtyard, you imagine yourself to be very small relative to the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why do I say this? The question we're trying to answer is, why does evil exist? Why do we think and why do we fathom evil exists in our life, in our world? Imagine for a moment that you see a beautiful work of art. Let's say the Mona Lisa. When you look at the Mona Lisa, that's in the Louvre in Paris, nowadays many people make, for example, puzzle pieces out of it. You may go to the store and see a puzzle piece. And when you see this puzzle, it's broken into hundreds of pieces. And when you break those hundreds of pieces, and you pick up one piece, you may find this one piece is brown or black or discolored, and it doesn't look very beautiful. But when you place all of these pieces together, you begin to realize a picture emerges. You and I are like that individual who's looking at one piece of the puzzle and judging God. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows how the puzzle's pieces will unfold. Therefore, you and I do not have the right to blame Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say that He is allowing injustice to occur. I'll give you another example. Roughly 100 years ago, there was an amazing book written called Flatland. I recommend you all read this book. Flatland is a journey of the mind. It's a thought experiment. Imagine for a moment that you live in a two-dimensional world. I may have to remind us of what are our dimensions. When you have a straight line, that is one-dimensional space. You may remember this, straight line. Point A to point B, one dimension. You add another dimension, you get two dimensions. X-axis, Y-axis. You remember your Cartesian coordinate system, right? You get two dimensions. Think of a piece of paper. Or for example, for those of you who play video games, Super Mario. Or Tetris when you used to play it. That's a two-dimensional framework. Imagine now three dimensions. What do three dimensions look like? A box. Think of a box. It has a length, a width, a height. It has three dimensions, X, Y, Z coordinate. Bear with me, this is technical, but hopefully it gets the point across. The book Flatland says now, imagine for a moment that you live in a two-dimensional world. What do you see in your two-dimensional world? You live in the world that's a piece of paper. We, of course, live in a three-dimensional world. Three dimensions, not two dimensions. Imagine you're living in a world with Super Mario, with Tetris, with a plain piece of paper. And now at the same time, imagine in this two-dimensional world, I take my three-dimensional finger that has length, width, height, and I place it in the two-dimensional world. What will the person who's living in the two-dimensional world see? What will they see? It's an interesting thought experiment. What will Super Mario see? What will the person playing Tetris inside that world see? They will see, ahsantum, building on that, they will see a skin-colored, a flesh-colored line. Think about this for a moment. If I have a three-dimensional finger and I put this in a two-dimensional world, there's no other dimensions. There's no third dimension in a two-dimensional world. that individual in the two-dimensional world will see a flesh-colored line. Let's take a pillar here. Let's take a line right there. That person who's living in the two-dimensional world will simply see a line that is the color of my flesh. Let's give that line a name. The name we give that line is evil. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is understanding every single dimension of existence. We live in a limited capacity of 3 dimensions. The analogy for us would be, how do you visualize 4 dimensions? Can we visualize 4 dimensions? We cannot visualize it. But mathematics shows us, and string theory shows us, that we live in a world that is at least 9 or 11 or 13 dimensions. But you and I cannot visualize that space. Analogously, we make assessments and judgments on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without knowing the other dimensions of existence. This is the world that you and I live in. We get this, what's called the God complex. Are you familiar with the God complex? The God complex is this idea that if I can understand one complex system, I can understand every complex system. Somebody who, for example, understands the human body thinks I can understand every financial system. You'll find this very common in our communities, by the way. Nonetheless, what's the difference? There's a joke that goes along the lines of, what's the difference between God and a neuroscientist? The idea is God doesn't want to be a neuroscientist, or God doesn't think he's a neuroscientist, whereas the neuroscientist thinks he's God. The idea is when you start getting this God complex, you think that I know everything about everything. In Arabia, they used to say the sign, do you know what half of knowledge is? Nisf of knowledge? The half of knowledge was the ability to be able to say, I don't know. If you knew how to say, I don't know, you had half of knowledge already. The idea in the modern world is I must have answers to everything, I know everything, and I am me, and I am me. The idea that I'm saying, the homework, the action item that you and I must take is, we must not just listen to common narratives and think because these common narratives are out there, there are not answers to them. We must do our homework and find the answers to these questions. The Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, the Quran have given us answers to these questions and these issues about why does evil exist and what's the purpose. And I'm coming to this inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When it came to the issue of evil, the Quran al-Majid wa Furqan al-Hamid and Islam told us there's 2 types. One is shar, the other is ibtila, which we may call a test. Shar min sharr al-waswasil khannas. Shar is that evil which is man-made. That idea, that concept that a human being, in our modern world, we suffer from many evils and many vices that are created by man. Whether that's war, whether that's famine, whether it's many other aspects of life and society. I remember I was reading an article, it was in NPR, and all the major press outlets had released it. In 1967, the sugar lobby in the United States had paid off researchers at Harvard Medical University. And they told them that we want you to not focus on the negative impacts of sugar on the heart, and focus rather on the impact of fat on the heart. For 50 years, they paid $50,000, and over 50 years, there was a whole age and generation of researchers who were not looking at the negative impact of sugar on the heart because some institutions had been paid off. Harvard is not a small institution. Other institutions look at Harvard to derive their research and see where the trend is going. This is happening on our watch. Furthermore, in the United States, I'm just coming back from the UK, they don't use, for example, high fructose corn syrup like we do. We use it in abundance. There is no logical reason for that to be the case. The reason is because the sugar lobby is very organized in the United States. They control the price of the sugar. We use false ingredients in our foods. This has an impact on our body. This has an impact on our life. This has an impact on cancer and many other factors. But you and I may be oblivious to this. We may not know this. That vice, that evil is because of the shar of man that the Quran says. That there are certain individuals who are more concerned with filling up their wallets than the health and prosperity of other people. That type of evil cannot be blamed on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because you and I, we want to have our cake and eat it too. That is, we want to have this notion where when times are bad, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala interjects and helps out. But when times are good, I want to have my autonomy and my free will. I don't want to lose that either. This is why Einstein was saying that the world is a dangerous place, not because of evil people, because of those people who see it and don't do anything. You and I have a responsibility to make sure that we do whatever is in our ability to try to solve the problems of society. Therefore, we as followers of Ahlul Bayt must be at the forefront of social justice. Whether that's through voting or raising awareness, environmentalism, these are part and parcel of our responsibility. Furthermore, when you get into this idea of shar, when Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam went to Karbala, those things that Imam alayhi salam faced, the evils that he faced were because of the shar of Yazid and the Umayyad dynasty. The evil that they had created, that Amr ibn As had created, that Yazid had created, that Muawiyah before Yazid had created, these led to an environment that there was evil in the world, that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam endured. But there's another aspect that the Quran says, ibtila, wa is ibtila Ibrahim. Ibtila is a test that Allah gives individuals to help them get to a status of kamal, to try to get people to perfection. One is shar, which is man-made. The other is a test or a trial that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to His creation in order to help him get to a higher level and a higher status. For example, who? For example, we're told Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Ibrahim alayhi salam a test. Allah says in the Quran that we tested Ibrahim through the test of his trial and of his son. His son who was born after many years, Ismail. And after that, they said to sacrifice the son. But after going through this entire process, the Quran said, we made Ibrahim an imam on the people. The idea is when he passed the test, he got to the highest level. When we went to the story of Musa, it was the same. Musa passed the test and got to a higher level and a higher station. Throughout times, those individuals who went through these tests, they got to a higher station. The idea was that this was not an evil to condemn someone, to harm someone. The idea was that this was something to foster the growth of an individual. When you and I, when we go to take an exam, if I want to become a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer or an economist or a psychologist, I have to go through a series of tests. The idea is I must study, I must practice, and I must make sure that I accomplished whatever success I want. This is exactly the same way. But the question that emerges from this is quite interesting. Do the imams also go through a process of spiritual elevation? It's a phenomenal and profound question that was actually asked by the likes of Shaheed al-Sadr and Sayyid Munir al-Khabaz. I'm referring to the work of Sayyid Munir al-Khabaz. You may not be aware of him. If you are aware of him, alhamdulillah. Sayyid Munir is one of the top khatibs in the Shia world. Not only that, he is a student of some of the most prominent scholars throughout our generations. He's been a student of, for example, Sayyid al-Khuy, may Allah bless him. He's been a student of the likes of Ayatollah Wahid al-Khurasani. Ayatollah Wahid al-Khurasani, when you ask the teachers in the Hawza, particularly in Najaf, who is the A'lam Marja? For example, who's the most learned? Two names always come to the front. The first being Sayyid Sistani and the second being Ayatollah Wahid. Back and forth, they go back and forth. The idea is, in terms of most knowledgeable, Ayatollah Wahid al-Khurasani is also the one who leads the Hawza Ilmiya of Qom. He's the top person at the charge of the Hawza Ilmiya of Qom. He studied under him. He studied under Ayatollah Tabrizi, and he has ijaza from him. He's a mujtahid. Sayyid Munir is also an individual who is one of the few people who can actually say he has been a student of Ayatollah Sistani. Ayatollah Sistani, as you know, has not been given dars for the past few years, especially past couple of decades, since he's been a marja, for some particular reasons. But before he declared his marja'iyah, Sayyid Munir was his student. In his book, Sayyid Munir, he cites a very interesting discussion where he says, this imam of ours, the imam of our time, what's our relationship with the imam of our time? And what is the relationship between the imam of our time and our third imam, Abu Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam? What is this relationship? Because when you and I, one of the things that we are recommended, for example, on the 15th of Sha'ban, is to recite the ziyarah of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. You're thinking for a moment, it's the birthday of our 12th imam. Why am I being told to recite the ziyarah of the third imam? Meaning, I should commemorate the 12th imam. Why am I commemorating the third imam? The idea was the mission of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam and the mission of Imam al-Hujjah is inseparable. That is the culmination of the struggle and the revolution of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam is realized through the vision of Imam Sahib al-Asr al-Zaman. You and I must always have a relationship with this Imam of ours. We are told, Man mata walam ya'rif imama zamanihi, mata mitatan jahiliya. The one who dies without ma'rifah of the Imam of his time dies a death of ignorance. Therefore, we must cultivate this relationship. So Sayyid Munir, in his book, he looks at a particular aspect from the book of Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, Shaheed al-Sadr. Many of you will remember Shaheed al-Sadr, who was killed by the Ba'athist regime in Iraq. This person, we sometimes don't realize through what challenges Shiaism has gone to reach you and I. It's not easy. You know, I was just in, one brother I met in the United Kingdom told me that he studied and he was in Kazakhstan for 5 years teaching. You know, do you know where the Sadat went when they were persecuted? There were times in the history of Baghdad where they would not erect a building until they drained the blood of a Sayyid Hassani in the cement. This is how difficult it was to be a follower of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. That's why people went to isolated regions such as, for example, Bukhara. You'll find Bukhara, which is in modern day Uzbekistan. You have Sadat that are from there. You have people who, for example, scattered throughout the Persian Gulf, you will find these small pockets. In Kazakhstan, the brother told me, there are Sadat villages of Sayyids who claim lineage to the Imams. On Eid day, do you know what they do? On Eid day, they put out a chair and leave it empty. But they don't know why they do it. They say our fathers used to do this, our grandfathers used to do this, our great-grandfathers used to do it, but we don't know why we do it anymore. One may conclude and one may deduce that they're leaving it there for the Imam. But these generations don't know why it's being done. You and I must make sure when it comes to Shair of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, the signs of the mourning of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, whether it's the Zari, whether it's the Alam, whatever it may be, we must be telling our next generation why we're doing it. And not just be going that, God forbid, people don't know why the Alam is there, why the Zari is there, why is there there. The poet says, Roz roza-e sheh par kaise hazri hogi, hasrat-e ziyarat ne taziya bana dala. The idea was, how can you go from the Indian subcontinent, for example, at that time, you couldn't always travel and see Karbala, you couldn't see Najaf, you couldn't see Qom, you couldn't see Mashhad. Therefore, you created these symbols, not because they're anything per se, that they're the nisbah, what gives these fadila, what gives the alam, what gives the dhari, what gives its tremendous merit is the association with the Imam. Once you have made a nisbah, a connection of something to the Imam, the ihtiram, the respect becomes wajib on it. It's not something that's optional anymore. That's why it's there. You and I must be cognizant of what's going on. Sayyid Munir says, when he's quoting Shaheed al-Sadr, Shaheed al-Sadr says, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep the Imam alive for so long? He gives a very interesting response, which Sayyid Munir says Shaheed al-Sadr has been very misunderstood. Shaheed al-Sadr is that person who Saddam, we're told, he tied him and his sister Amina bint al-Huda back to back and tied them down, and he began to beat his sister Amina bint al-Huda in front of his eyes. And he said, just unleash me, release these ropes and fight me man to man. This is roughly the 80s, this is not that long ago. And he beat her and his brother's just watching, not being able to do anything. Until he takes the barrel of the gun and kills them himself, both of them. And we still don't have the bodies. Shiaism did not reach us very easily, it was very hard. So if you and I take this miracle for granted, we wouldn't be doing justice. It would be a tragedy if our next generations are saying, my parents were Shia, I'm not Shia. We need to make this a priority in life. Shaheed al-Sadr, by the way, many of the top scholars who are Maraja today have alluded to the fact that if Shaheed al-Sadr was alive, they would not declare their marja'iyah out of respect of Shaheed al-Sadr. His knowledge was at that level. He says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept Imam Sahib al-Zaman alive for a prolonged period of time so that he sees all the cycles of civilization, all the ups and downs of civilization, so he gets to a level of kamal, that he's seen everything. The idea is the prophets go through a process where they go through trials and tribulations to elevate their position. Now the question that emerges from this is, do the imams also go through this process? Because on one side, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said that He created the nur of Rasulullah before Adam, much before, thousands of years before Adam. And from the nur of Rasulullah, He created the nur of Ali ibn Abi Talib. He split that nur into two. And from that, the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam came. And they are born imams. It's not that they become imams. So therefore, do the imams themselves go through a process of purification to get to kamal? It's a very interesting question. The scholars say, based on the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt, yes, but be very careful here. How? They do not go through a process of perfection in terms of halal and haram. There is an authentic tradition from our sixth Imam that is in Bihar al-Anwar. By the way, Bihar al-Anwar, none of our books are 100% authentic. They all have traditions that are, some are sahih, some are not sahih. Some are, for example, there is a dispute amongst the scholars. Our most authentic books of traditions are Usul al-Kafi, Man la yahdar al-Faqih, Tahzib and Istabsar. These are the 4 books. Even Usul al-Kafi, the scholars will not say is 100% authentic. It's roughly 60%, 66, about 2/3% accurate, they'll say. We need to be very constant. But the scholars have said, this tradition that I'm about to tell you, it in terms of its sanad, its chain of narrators, is authentic, as well as it is mutawatir. That means it has been relayed from so many people that you must accept it. Mutawatir being that so many different people said it that you must accept it. Why? Because it's not like today's social media era. In social media, I just push out a message and I can push fake news throughout the world. At that time, if someone in Sham, someone in Iraq, someone in Medina, multiple people are saying this, you must say that there's some validity there. The Imam alayhi salam says that we go through a stage of purification. We go through stages and levels. The companion asked, Yabna Rasulullah, do you go through this in stages of understanding halal and haram? He says, no. We already know what is halal and haram. We know all of divine law. We've been given it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In another tradition, by the way, the Ahlul Bayt, all of them are alive. I hope you understand this. A shaheed can be alive, the Ahlul Bayt are not alive. The idea is, Allah subhanahu, in fact, our Ahlul Sunnah brothers, with the exemption of certain groups who are in this modern world, they all accept that Rasulullah, they used to at least, that Rasulullah is hayyun fi qabr, he's alive in his grave. Rasulullah is alive. The Imams are alive. In that sense, not in the worldly sense, not in the bodily sense that you and I may imagine. Why is this important? Because they have been given divine knowledge. The companion continued. He said, Yabna Rasulullah, how do you, the Ahlul Bayt, how do you perfect yourself spiritually? You have been sent divinely from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Imam alayhi salam says, we perfect ourselves, and the scholars have commented on this, not in terms of halal and haram. We perfect ourselves in terms of our ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every single day, our understanding and our recognition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases. Imagine, the Ahlul Bayt are saying that every day their ma'rifah is increasing. Well, how should you and I be? It may be that we are on a very surface level understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That even the Ahlul Bayt are perfecting themselves in terms of their ma'rifah. Why do I say this? Because someone may come forward and say, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam on the plains of Karbala, he went forward and he sacrificed his family. Was this Allah's plan? Did Allah do this? Was this shar? What was this shar? Was this ibtila? What was it? And the scholars have said, that thing that was done by Yazid, that which was done by Amr ibn As, that was shar. That was the evil that they had done. Do you know Muawiyah had started bribing people? He had started paying people. Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali was a companion of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. After Amir al-Mu'mineen was assassinated, once he was assassinated, Muawiyah began to kill his companions, Amir al-Mu'mineen's companions, and he began to try to bribe certain people. Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali, he was sent from Muawiyah a jar of honey mixed with saffron, which was an extremely expensive delicacy at that point in time. When he was sent this delicacy, his daughter, Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali's daughter, took a small taste of it. When he saw her doing, he did not know. He says that you must remove this and spit this out, because I tell you this is worse than poison. Because this has been sent by Muawiyah in order to buy our love of Ali ibn Abi Talib. You and I must never sell our iman for cheap. This is the shar, that is what the Quran is saying. At another point in time, Amr ibn As, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam himself told him, you are killing me because you think and you have been promised Rai, which is close to Tehran, modern day Tehran. You think that you will get the rulership of Rai. I'm telling you, while I'm alive, you will never get it. And history also says, after Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was killed under the forces of Amr ibn As, he never got Rai. The idea is, if you try to sell yourself and your faith, you will neither be here nor there. You will neither get this dunya nor will you get the akhirah. When we come to the mission of Imam Abu Abdullah, the mission of Abu Abdullah is directly tied to the mission of our 12th Imam. How and why? Our third Imam said, I have not risen. Inni lam akhruj ashiran wala batiran wala mufsiran wala zaliman. I have not gotten up for any type of, to be an oppressor or someone to call fitna and fasad in the land. I have only gotten up for one thing. Talab al-islah fi ummati jaddi. The Imam was noticing the world was going in one direction. He said, I must put a stop to it and make the world go in a different direction. But this idea of ibtila, the test that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam gave, was to get him to the level where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, O Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, you've given this test to me, you've passed this test, therefore from now until Yawm al-Qiyamah, if anyone has a hajat, it will be granted from you. From now until Qiyamah, until the day of judgment, your dust, the earth of your qabr will be khaki shifa. If anyone needs cure, they will get it from here. From now until Qiyamah, Aba Abdullah, your family, the lineage of Imama will continue from you. Imam alayhimus salam never forgot this. You and I, with respect to our relationship for the 12th Imam, the take-home message of tonight is develop a relationship with the Imam of your time. Think about him. Think about what he's doing, where he is. The Imam, our scholars tell us, he's not hidden the way you think he is. He's not living in a cave somewhere. The Imam is not in a remote island. The Imam is living amongst you and I. It's just that his persona has been hidden from our eyes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed him to go to Hajj. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed him to live amongst the people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him all of these things. But you and I must be mindful of our Imam. Develop a relationship with this Imam. It's important that we instill this in our lives and never forget the Imam. And I tell you, what is the Imam of our time remembering and recollecting? He says that day and night, my grandfather Aba Abdullah, I commemorate you and I remember you. And he says day and night in Ziyarat-e-Nahya, he says day and night I weep for you, and when my tears dry up I cry blood for you. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Ajrukum Allah. Ajrukum Allah. I tell you, I was living in Dubai many years ago. There was an alim there by the name of Sayyid Sadiq Ali Shah, marhum. He was a great scholar who was someone who had been very close to the Hakim family. I'm saying this as an eyewitness and someone who heard this directly. It's not something that was said, for example, by someone. I heard it from someone. I heard this directly from Maulana Sadiq Ali Shah, who was one of the wakils of the Hakim family. He says that as a young student, I asked Ayatullah Mohsin al-Hakim, how is it possible? I hear and I read in the ziyarah of the Imam, how is it possible that someone can cry tears? I understand that. But how is it possible to cry blood? I don't understand that. At that point in time, Agha said, I want you to have a majlis here right now. He said, invite a reciter. When they invited a reciter, everyone sat down. The few people who were there, they sat down. He recited the musibah of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. The student, Maulana Sadiq Ali Shah, says that I saw that Agha Mohsin al-Hakim, he put his handkerchief on his eyes. When he put his handkerchief on his eyes, he began to weep during the musibah. After the musibah had ended, everyone had left. When everyone left, we the students, we wanted to depart from Ayatollah Mohsin al-Hakim and say that we are going now. He said that when he got to him, we were about to ask permission to leave. When we were about to ask permission to leave, he said, wait a moment. He stopped him. He removed the handkerchief from his eyes. And he says, Allah is my witness. I saw blood in his handkerchief. This is someone who's not the Imam. This is someone who is a follower of the Imam. My Imam is saying that I cry day and night for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Ajrukum ala Allah. Ajrukum ala Allah. Imam alayhi salam in ziyarat, he says that salam on my grandfather whose lips had dried from thirst. Salam on my grandfather whose neck had been severed from his head. Salam on my grandfather whose teeth had been broken with a rod. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Ajrukum ala Allah. Final, I will keep it very brief. We're told there's a moment in time in the bazaar after the tragedy of Karbala. There was a moment, I don't know why this masaib is coming to my heart. There was a moment where the heads were on the spears of the shuhada. When the heads were on the spears of the shuhada, there was one lady who was not part of the family of Imam al-Hussein. She was looking at the spears on the head and she saw those spears that had the heads on them, and she was looking and staring at one head. When she was staring at this head that was on the spear, there was a mother who was there. She went to that lady and said, oh lady, can you please tell me what are you staring at? She said, I am looking at this face. This youth is the most beautiful youth that I have ever seen in my life. I am praying in my heart and my soul that whoever this youth is, that his mother was not alive to see him in this state. Layla began to beat herself. She says, lady, do not say this. This is my son Ali Akbar. I am his mother. I was standing a few feet away when they separated his head from his body. Ajrukum ala Allah. Ajrukum ala Allah. Ajrukum ala Allah. Final narration, we are told Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, after the tragedy of Karbala, on the day Arba'een, after he got to Karbala, he had not seen a friend in a very long time. When he got to Karbala, he met Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari. Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari met the Imam. They embraced one another. They hugged one another. The Imam said that, oh Jabir, do you know what happened on my heart? Do you know what happened to me on the night of Ashura? On Sham-e Ghariban. Do you know what they did afterwards? He said, Yabna Rasulullah, what did they do? He said it was not enough that they killed our family. They beheaded the bodies. They said that now we will trample over the bodies. Every single person said, we will not allow you to trample over the bodies. Every tribesman pulled everyone away. He says, Jabir, the only person left was my father, Abu Abdullah. Jabir, I heard his bones breaking under the hooves of the horses. Jabir, I couldn't do anything to help my father. Do you know what it's like for a son to hear the bones of his father breaking? That is why Imam Sajjad, when he went back to Medina, every time he would see an animal being slaughtered, he would face Karbala. He would say, Assalamu alayka ya Abu Abdullah. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله صلى الله عليك يا أمير المؤمنين صلى الله عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين صلى الله عليك يا حسن المجتبى السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى الصحاب الحسين. معتم يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين.
Hussein, 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 Countless voices cry in mourning, weeping with grief and pain. Had I a sword, I would defend the veil of Zainab. Countless voices cry in mourning, weeping with grief and pain. Had I a sword, I would defend the veil of Zainab. On Ashura, the family of Hussein caused earth to shake. On Ashura, the family of Hussein caused earth to shake. It heard the swords clash across the field, cries of Al-Atash. Had I a sword, I would defend the veil of Zainab. Countless voices cry in mourning, weeping with grief and pain. Had I a sword, I would defend the veil of Zainab. Battle over, all the men had gone, no one there to defend. Battle over, all the men had gone, no one there to defend. The veils were snatched, jewelry pulled from ears, Sakina's cry so pure. Had I a sword, I would defend the veil of Zainab. Countless voices cry in mourning, weeping with grief and pain. Had I a sword, I would defend the veil of Zainab. Paraded through the streets and markets to Kufa and Sham. Paraded through the streets and markets to Kufa and Sham. O people, did you not know them? They are of Rasul. Had I a sword, I would defend the veil of Zainab. Countless voices cry in mourning, weeping with grief and pain. Had I a sword, I would defend the veil of Zainab. The court in Sham, the palace of Yazid, tied in chains in pain. The court in Sham, the palace of Yazid, tied in chains in pain. Zainab stood defending Islam for us all so brave. Had I a sword, I would defend the veil of Zainab. Countless voices cry in mourning, weeping with grief and pain. Had I a sword, I would defend the veil of Zainab. The tragedy of the martyrs will live in our hearts. The tragedy of the martyrs will live in our hearts. The lessons from those in Karbala, examples for us all. Had I a sword, I would defend the veil of Zainab. Countless voices cry in mourning, weeping with grief and pain. Had I a sword, I would defend to show you Zainab. So now we stand grieving and mourning to show you Zainab. The sacrifice of Imam Hussein we will never forget. Had I a sword, I would defend the veil of Zainab. Countless voices cry in mourning, weeping with grief and pain. Had I a sword, I would defend the veil of Zainab.
Hussein, 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 Hussein,
Allahu Akbar, my beloved Akbar. Allahu Akbar, my beloved Akbar. Allahu Akbar, my beloved Akbar. Go and say the final adhan. Go and say the final adhan. It's time to test our iman. Allahu Akbar, my beloved Akbar. Allahu Akbar, my beloved Akbar. Oh Ibrahim Khalilullah, watch me as I offer my son to Allah. Oh Ibrahim Khalilullah, watch me as I offer my son to Allah. No blindfold for my eyes, no blindfold for my eyes. Is there anyone who hears my cries? Allahu Akbar, my beloved Akbar. Allahu Akbar, my beloved Akbar. Say hayya ala khairil amal. It's time to carry out our final amal. Say hayya ala khairil amal. It's time to carry out our final amal. For Islam we must sacrifice. For Islam we must sacrifice. In shahadat we must end our lives. Allahu Akbar, my beloved Akbar. Allahu Akbar, my beloved Akbar. You're the living ziyarah of Mustafa. In your walk, in your talk, in your looks you are. You're the living ziyarah of Mustafa. In your walk, in your talk, in your looks you are. Can the army of Yazid not see? Can the army of Yazid not see? Killing you is like killing a Nabi. Allahu Akbar, my beloved Akbar. Allahu Akbar, my beloved Akbar. Go and say the final adhan. Go and say the final adhan. It's time to test our iman. Allahu Akbar, my beloved Akbar. Allahu Akbar, my beloved Akbar. Hussein, 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 Hussein,
Hussein, Hussein, Hussein, Hussein, Hussein, Hussein, Hussein, Hussein, Hussein, Hussein. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Assalamu alayka ya ibn Rasulillah. Assalamu alayka ya ibna Amir al-Mu'minin. Assalamu alayka ya ibna Fatima az-Zahra, Sayyidat an-Nisa'i al-Alamin. Assalamu alayka wa ala jaddika wa abik, wa ala ummika wa akhik. Assalamu alayka wa ala tis'atil ma'sumin ذريتك. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن ويا إمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مهرجك وجعلنا من أنصارك وأوانك برحمة الله وبركاته.
Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. All the young ones come and